Welcome everybody to the next episode of the.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah,
You gotta go.
yeah. Okay, we got it. No worries, no problem. We had a bit of laughs before, so we're gonna kick it right off. We're gonna get right into it. We're joined by one of the fan favorites of Living Fast, Alex Zastre. Everybody remembers his once in a lifetime trailer, and it will be once in a lifetime because it's never coming back.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I like to hear.
Welcome back, Alex, to the Living Fast podcast, and welcome all you to the next episode of the Living Fast podcast.
Go.
I am so excited to be joined here by my co-host, Jake Perkins.
What's up, guys?
And the one and only Alex Zastre. Obviously, he has done a hell of a lot of great things since being on this podcast, and we're here to talk about a lot of that today. So, Alex, you're very familiar how we kick it off at Living Fast.
Yeah.
And if you were to come on here, we're all about making people feel comfortable so they can share their max value and really just honestly share what they think. We're Mr. Unfiltered here. You can really say anything, spit anything. And if you say anything you don't want, we'll cut it, no worries. But I know that's not your style. So if you were to come on here and really provide the most value, where do you want to kick us off?
That's a great question. Most value possible. I think make sure that you hit the ground running with anything. Speed kills, as you guys know. Live fast. But seriously, speed kills, and the faster you can fail, the faster you'll succeed. I think that'd be kind of my 2 cents. And thank you very much, Weston and Jake, for having me on.
100%. Yeah. So speed kills. I definitely, feel that in my own life. And I want to give a shout out to, Locked In Supplements, because I don't think I would have got this business live without Alex's mantra of speed kills. He often was in my ear when I was growing it. You got to get it live. You got to get it live. You got to move fast. And it's definitely someone that I look up to in that regard in terms of a mentor. So it really, really hit hard. And it definitely makes me, sit here and be happy why we have this podcast and why we're actually here, able to film this new episode. So I think, starting there is something that we can really dive into. So when I was looking into, a little bit what you've been doing, one thing that really hit home with, the value you've been providing is you're looking to disrupt the entire, financial industry. You're obviously doing something very big in the financial industry. Where do you see the best strategies in terms of, disrupting the financial industry, and how do you see those, strategies really going forward? Because I know you're famous for, doing a lot of things. I would say you're the ultimate middleman for selling to rich people. So how do you see those strategies really coming forward and, making an impact in the industry?
Yeah, 100%. I think since I kind of, the last time I was on this podcast, I was not as well known in the internet space as I kind of am now. I've gained a little bit of a following, not a ton, but definitely people are more aware of middlemaning general transactions through cold email or marketing techniques than they were back then. Maybe that's a product of me. Maybe it's a product of other guys coming to the same conclusion that was a good spot to be in. But I think now, for me at least, the sentiment is, okay, I've learned all these things from conducting transactions, generating term sheets for these large businesses and helping them to find institutional investors through cold email or, through paid advertising. And now the question is, knowing the space better now, how can I create more value for these individuals? Because that is really what the essence of all of it is at the end of the day, is how can you get as much torque and leverage on an action that you would do in a lower part of the market for a higher part of the market. And so now that I'm kind of in this higher part of the market and I have gone from okay, I'm here, but I see up there, now being up there on that plane and seeing eye to eye with those individuals and having a better understanding for their pain points. I think that there's a lot of nuanced ways that, a tremendous amount of value can be created for them. Things like helping funds get assets under management. Right now, that's a massive problem. You start a fund tomorrow and you want to invest in private equity. It's really difficult for you to have assets under management because, you're a new fund manager. And so that's something I figured out recently is okay, you can, I don't want to give too much away, but basically what you can do is with a lawyer, you can figure out ways to reach out to people that already have existing assets and structure it in a way so that that person can effectively borrow those assets under management. And the only way that I could figure out something like that, which is, like a $150,000, $200,000 service, right? And a really in-demand service by that section of the market. The only way I could figure that out was kind of by being on that plane, playing in that game and saying, okay, this is a problem that these guys are experiencing. How do I fix that? And so I think there's a ton of stuff like that where there's new things that get unlocked that are much deeper than just like, I'm sending cold emails to investors from businesses. There's like higher level plays that you can make that are like more replicatable and higher ticket for less effort, which is the name of the game always, is like, how can I do the least amount of work and get the most amount of torque on whatever action I'm doing in order to drive value?
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I have one for you, Alex, because we're obviously just meeting here for the first time today. I know through your history that you learned a whole bunch of shit when you got into entrepreneurship. You upskilled like crazy. And now you're playing in this space with kind of some of the big boys. But there's this theme where you learn shit real fast, right? So like, I'm curious to know, number one, how do you do that? And number two, why is that so important for somebody who's trying to, take that leap into starting their own thing?
Yeah, I think the number one way that I learn is by doing, to be completely honest. I think a lot of guys spend a lot of time in kind of like the
ivory tower of theory almost.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Like a ton of guys will watch a ton of YouTube videos, read a bunch of books, do a bunch of stuff. And like, yes, I read books. I never watch YouTube. I don't watch Iman Gadzhi YouTube. I don't watch Alex Hormozi YouTube. Like, I've never sat down and watched a full 5-minute YouTube video from an entrepreneur. It's never happened. But I'll listen to podcasts and I'll read just to give me kind of a good overarching macro understanding of things. But really the essence of like, oh, where did you learn all this stuff is in doing. The only way that I figured out the example gap in the market that I gave you guys 2 seconds ago was from doing, was from like, okay, I had, connected enough people with investors to the point where a guy came to me and was like, hey, do you want to be a part of my fund? And then I joined it and I was like, okay, I've worked with first time funds before. I know this is going to be an uphill battle. How do we make this less of an uphill battle? Okay, we need to figure out how to get assets under management in here.
Right.
And so the only way that I would have learned that is by doing, is by the actual action. And that's why speed is so important, because the faster you move, the faster you're going to actually try things, the faster you're going to fail at things, but also the faster you're going to be able to identify issues in the market that you can fix.
So one thing I'm curious about that is like, I feel like finance is a space historically where people think like you gotta know what you're talking about if you're gonna be in some of these rooms, right? Because as soon as people feel like you don't, you're done, you're gone. So when you talk about, the only ways to learn by doing, for you, was there just a whole bunch of, man, I'm gonna go into some meetings and if shit goes sideways and I mess it up, then so be it? Like, was that kind of the approach?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was a lot of, in the beginning, like, okay, I'm going to go into this meeting. I'll have GPT up on one side of the screen and I'll have the meeting up on the other, and I'll figure it out as I go along.
Yeah.
And then there's also talking to people that are already in the industry. Like I came through the industry by way of guys that had already had success in the industry. And so, asking them as many questions as possible. And I think now I actually ask those same guys more questions than I did when I first started.
Because you probably know more of what to ask now. Right?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Is that because I've done, now I know like, okay, these are the things that I actually need help with. Whereas in the beginning, like, what am I going to say? Hey, give me a crash course on the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that's been really good. I've found.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I see from you, and I think that is very interesting, is you're never afraid to go and go out there and send those, like I like to say, roll up your sleeves. You're not afraid to roll up your sleeves and actually do the work, do it. I don't want to say the old fashioned way, because I'm not saying that all these are old fashioned techniques, but you're definitely someone that when I think of Alex Zastre, I think of volume. I think of living fast. I think of do the work, do the volume. And I want to kind of dig into that a little bit and really understand, like, where did that come from? Why do you think that's, the new way? When I think of that, it's like send 1,000 cold emails, door knocks, go door to door. Not that that is like the only way to do it, but you're definitely someone, when someone's up and starting, you're not afraid to kind of give them that hard advice. Like, yo, kick it the old fashioned way. Go knock on someone's door and film a video, or go, make 1,000 cold calls. What is that your advice for someone that's starting out and wants to, break into any industry, that maybe even not even the financial industry, anything at all? What's your advice for someone getting started and wants to do some of the things to you?
Yeah. I think just taking it to kind of the first part of that, which is like, why is that the way that it's ended up? I think it's two-pronged. I think, number one is, I was thinking about this the other day. Like when I was in, like the 6th grade, 7th grade, we'd get an assignment in like English class, and I would spend the 45 minutes of class fucking around, and then the last 15 minutes I would get the work done, and it would be like an above average result, I suppose. And so that's kind of always been my thing, is just like, just ram it. And then as I've gotten older, it's turned into like, okay, well now it's no longer like, okay, spend 45 minutes doing nothing. It's like, I always want to be doing something, and I get bored if I'm doing the same thing constantly over and over again, which stops me from being analytical. But then I still have like that 15-20 minute window of focus where I could just plow something out. And then the second part is, I started in door-to-door. Like when I was, my first sales job was when I was 13, going door-to-door for Canadian Cancer Society. And that's a really good, easy door-to-door role that I'd recommend somebody takes, because you're selling charity. So like, it wasn't commission-based. Like I wouldn't do it if you were trying to make money. It was volunteer work, but it gets you really good at like getting the door slammed in your face in a super nice way, because nobody's going to be a dick to somebody trying to get donations for charity, and people are really likely to donate. So you get like that hit of like, okay, I can collect cash at the door. And then I did painting, college pro painters door to door from like 16 to 19. And then I sold wireless from like 19 to 20, 18 to 20 at the Source. So like I've just had in-person sales jobs for a really long time. So I know what it's like to have to knock 1,000 doors, or to, get somebody in your face telling you like, no, I do not want to buy your stupid cellular plan. Just give me the phone charger and let me go on my way. So I think that that's kind of where it comes from. Is like, I'm acutely aware of that kind of stuff, because I did it for so long in the beginning. And I definitely recommend people, like, I think younger guys, like I think if you're like 20 to 25, you might be past the point. And I kind of hesitate to say that, because I think anybody can learn anything. But I think you might be to the point where like you probably have other hard skills that you can pair with new skills that you can learn easier than sales. But I do think sales is a fantastic foundation. And like for younger guys, for like, I would say 13 to 20, 13 to 23, maybe, like that's a really good way to kind of get your start. And whenever somebody tells me like I did door-to-door sales, or I sold cars, or I sold wireless, I know they're going to be killers.
Yeah, this guy's got thick skin.
Correct. Yeah. So it's like a very quick indicator for me, and I've always leaned towards hiring those types of people, just because they I know that they can
also handle a no.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I know you talk about this, but like just getting uncomfortable and doing shit that is very high stress, that's sales. That's a lot of early sales, especially like the boiler room type sales jobs, right?
Yeah.
So curious, because you brought it back to some of the origins, kind of where you started with entrepreneurship. Was your family, were they entrepreneurs? Were they in sales?
No, both my parents are accountants.
Really? Yeah. Interesting. So how did you kind of come into that mindset of like, I got to start grinding and learning new skills, getting uncomfortable?
I don't know. I think like the genesis that I kind of go back to often is like when I was 8, I went out and I shoveled driveways in order to make some cash. Yep. And in 48 hours, I made like $300, and I was 8 years old. So like $300 was like
insane.
Like 10,000.
This is insane, dude. Like 100.
You buy an Xbox.
A lot of candy.
Yeah. And I did what I would do now with a lot of money, which is blow it. But either
shout
way,
out Locked and Blow.
Easy plug.
Easy one.
But yeah, I think. Where were we with that?
Shoveling.
Shoveling driveways.
yeah.
What was it? Intrinsic. No, I think it was like a learnt reaction to that. And then the cancer thing was kind of happenstance, but had evolved from that, where like I had to do some sort of volunteering for school. And so Door-to-Door Cancer Society was the one I chose. And I think it was because like, I've already done door-to-door. I've already knocked on people's doors and offered to shovel their driveways. So this is something I'm kind of familiar with. And then after I did that, then it was like, okay, well, I've got some degree of base skill set here. Might as well keep using it. And then, college pro painters came along when I was like 16. And I was like, okay, well, I can make, $200 on a weekend on like a Friday. And then I don't have to work at all for the rest of the week. Like I can just make $200, $300 for doing like next to nothing, And at the time, I guess I sound old saying that, but that was like good money, $600 bi-weekly for someone in high school. It's like decent money, I feel like, at that time.
Yep.
And so it was then I think it was like unlocked, like, okay, this is like a thing I can do. And I remember my dad would tell me like, sales is a skill. And I kind of brushed it off because it feels greasy. Like especially when you're that age, like all you hear is like salesmen are like greasy dudes.
Slick, like fast talker kind of.
Totally.
Yeah.
They get a bad rap for sure.
For sure. And so like I kind of would always not take it like seriously whenever he would say that. And then as I've gotten older, I've realized like, okay, this is like a good skill set and you don't have to be like a slick, sleazy salesman. Like my whole sales practice and what I teach people to do and how I do sales is like ask this person a ton of questions about themselves, build trust with them, legitimate trust, and the rest will fall into place if you have a product that you stand behind. If you're legitimately solving this person's problem, you don't need to be slick. I don't teach people to do objection handling. I don't think you should. It should just be like, hey, I've got a good product that I think would solve your problem. Let me hear about your problems. And then I can kind of explain to you very briefly why this is a good solve for you. But you already trust me so much that it's not going to take much convincing for me to get this in your hands.
It's more about being a good fit. That's what it's about.
100%.
And if they're not a good fit, you're not going to like sleaze them into it or any of that.
No.
That's not the way to do it.
No, and that's what lets you have the posture too, right? Like I know I'm helping. I know I'm solving your problem. If you don't want to buy in, that's up to you.
That's on you.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can have that frame. And we turn people down all the time, like at Thor's Hammer, the software I own, at Savvy Capital, I turn people down all the time that are not good fits for raising capital. And we have like base minimum requirements, but then even beyond base minimum requirements, if I'm talking to somebody or a sales guy comes to me and they're like, hey, check out this deck, watch this call that I had with this guy. And I think it's not really a good fit for this guy. I'll say this isn't a good fit for him, And then what you'll find is you'll tell somebody it's not a good fit. And like 4 months later, they'll bring somebody who it is a good fit for to you because you turn them away specifically.
Yeah.
So
almost creates more like
that
I want
pull,
it more.
like I want to work with you guys
100%.
bad now. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I had a question about something that you've said. I know you've talked about how you believe that investing in businesses and buying businesses is a lot smarter than buying real estate. And it's interesting because I know a lot of people, especially in Vancouver, their dream is like, I want to buy a home. That's like a very much a long-term goal, which is a great goal. But like, why is it that you think that buying businesses is so much smarter, especially if you have the kind of money where you could put a down payment down? Why put that into a business?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And I mean, I do talk about it. So I really like that question. I think it depends, and it's person by person. So like for me personally, as a business owner and somebody that knows, like I've built 5 or 6 businesses past $100,000 a month at this point in my life. Like I can do it pretty repeatedly. And out of 6, maybe I've tried to do that 9 or 10 times. And those additional 3 or 4 times, I haven't lost enough money worth talking about. Maybe I lost 20 grand total in those 3 to 4 businesses.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's good. I think, but the point is that like my downside risk personally is much lower than what I view the market's downside potential risk on real estate to be. And I don't like the idea that I buy a house, it sits there, and then the 2 million other people in Vancouver, as well as the government, decide is this asset going to go up or down?
Right. It's totally out of your control.
Totally out of my control.
Right.
So that being said, I am still looking at property, and I do on a consistent basis look at properties. But like it falls into kind of one of two buckets. One, buying a property in a market where for sure you are going to cash flow. Something like I don't know how much you guys know about real estate in Canada, but like Winnipeg, Manitoba, you can get a 1-bedroom apartment for fucking $60,000 and rent base is $1,000 a month. So you buy, exactly.
Amazing.
It's killer.
Holy shit.
So like looking at markets like that, I will still look at that on a regular basis because that makes sense, and it makes sense higher. You know, like the same thing that's true at the bottom of the market is true at a $500,000 home there. And then the second thing is I'll look for property for myself to try and figure out, what am I personally? I want to own a home one day,
100%.
But I still view it with that lens of like, okay, if I buy a home, I want it to like economically be a viable purchase.
You want it to make sense.
Yeah. Even if I'm never going to rent it out, I would like it to be in a market where if I did rent it out, it would be worth more than what my mortgage is. And in Vancouver, that is almost impossible to find. And even in markets that have notoriously been good in Canada, like Calgary, that's not true anymore. Calgary, you might cash flow $100 to $200 on like on an apartment or like a $500,000 home right now. So it's like even making like $1,000 or $2,000 a month on a property, who gives a fuck? Like seriously, who cares? You know? And then Thor's Hammer, like I bought it for whatever. I bought it for like call it mid 5 figures, and I'm in the middle of selling it for well into the 6 figures, like well past $500,000 bucks.
Hundreds, maybe even thousands of percentage of return.
Return.
Why is that? Why were you able to sell for more than you bought it for?
Great question. Because I know marketing, right? Like, so I went in, I bought the business. I absolutely rammed it with marketing. Sorry to the early customers, because fulfillment was not there. And then I cleaned up fulfillment, and now the business is stable, cash flowing a shit ton, and primed to be sold. But it was the marketing piece. And so it was something that I had control over. I went into the business knowing that the other competitor in that market was making good money. They were making, $200,000 a month, $150,000 a month, but they weren't doing any marketing at all. And so if I went in there as the only other competitor to them, and now there's like 1 or 2 additional competitors, but they're not in the same kind of ballpark on marketing and stuff. But at the time it was like, okay, if I have one other competitor and that competitor is not marketing, and I do marketing, worst case scenario, I'll come out at $100,000 or so a month, and I'm paying less than half of that for this business. So
makes way more sense.
Makes way more sense. And for 5 figures, like what kind of down payment am I going to put down? So my downside is heavily protected as well.
And so, when you talk about you had this massive injection of marketing into the business, I mean, you learned all that from scratch as well, right?
Yeah, that's true. Early days, I did have people that I would kind of like sit over their shoulder and watch them make ads. But then, and when I first started Savvy, I wasn't the one that made the ads. I had other people helping me make the ads. So I then kind of dissected what they were doing. I would ask a lot of questions to them about what they were doing. And then eventually I got like the Facebook Blueprint course, which is something I recommend that people take for sure. Going back to your earlier point of like, what would you? So that is something that I recommend, a free course. And I did watch YouTube videos at that time specifically on making ads. And I did the same thing on YouTube. I'm garbage at Google ads though, but then I did the same thing on YouTube. And I know how to run TikTok ads really well as well.
Meta ads are pretty gas, I know.
Yeah, the meta ads print.
Yeah, print money.
Yeah.
One thing that, I see a commonality that a lot of people know you have is the guy that is good at creating $100 million offers, also closing $100 million deals, which I think is just absolutely mind-boggling for a lot of people to even comprehend. And one thing that I always fall back on, one of the main lessons that I think is so important that you specifically talk about is it's better to sell one, let's say rich person a $1 million offer one time than to sell 1 million people $1 offer. And I'm not quoting you, but that's kind of my interpretation of it. But one thing that I find super interesting, I know a lot of other people are going to want to know kind of the ins and outs of. What is your advice for, creating those $100 million offers that make sense to people that have the money to buy it? And then a follow-up question to that is, what are your top secrets for closing those $100 million deals?
Okay. Those are both good questions. First one on coming up with the offer, pretty simple. Take whatever you know how to do. And I guess this is more so for entrepreneurs, because like if you're starting from scratch, it's going to be difficult. But generally speaking, if you're like an entrepreneur, you have a certain skill set. You should take that skill set, look at who your existing audience is, and then think to yourself, okay, who is my skill set worth the absolute most to? How can I take and I explained this in a video before, but basically, like most of the time, what people do is they go after markets where, let's say, creating Facebook ads, just as an example, creating Facebook ads for real estate agents. This real estate agent might make 60 grand off the sale of a home, right? Or 50 grand off the sale of a home, or 100 grand maybe off of the sale of a home. So if you're the one running the ads, I think they might make more than that, 200-300. If you're the one running the ads, the output of that is 200-300 grand. Okay, maybe. And there's a lot of ifs in the middle of that. If you go and run ads for a developer who is developing condos and he wants to sell all of them without the help of a real estate agent, or wants the pre-sale on all of them without the help of a real estate agent, well, that's now the output is millions and millions of dollars. And so this same input is creating 4, 5, 10x the amount of output for the end person. So by doing the same thing, you've created 10 times the amount of value. And so the question for everybody should be, how can I do the same thing I'm already doing and get way more value output for the end user from doing this thing?
And what's the secret to that?
The secret to that is sit down with GPT and think about it. Like and figure it out. Like I wish I had like that is like the closest I can get to like snapping my fingers and you understand the concept, or somebody watching understands the concept. And so I'll sit down with GPT and flesh ideas out. I'll do that, and then that ends up in a lot of the videos that I make. But the point of those videos is like it gets kind of your juices going. And then what was the second part to your question?
The top secrets for closing those $100 million deals.
Build trust, ask a lot of questions. I closed a guy on 150 grand up front the other day, like a week ago. And the whole sales process, like it was like 3 or 4 sales calls, and we're going to knock it out of the park for this guy, but it was like 3 or 4 sales calls. I closed him in 2 weeks. And we spent maybe, like let's say it was 5 hours total we spent on the phone. Maybe 25 minutes of that was talking about what I was going to do for him. The rest of the time, the remaining 4.5 hours was rapport. Build rapport with the guy, talking about how Nancy Pelosi's a crook, like, stuff that's real though. Like,
Authenticity.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't making anything up. I wasn't feigning interest in what he had to say. I wasn't being a slick salesman. I'm chatting with a buddy to the point where he's like, okay, I trust you. We're friends. You're not going to fuck me. And I'm trying to turn my money into more money. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, great. Let's do it.
I've heard that term used before. It's like the KLT factor, know, like, and trust. And if you have that with people, you're going to get a lot farther with them, right? I know there's a lot of people in the sales world that love this idea that, you don't really need them to like you. It's just, deliver the value. And my experience has definitely been that's not the case. Just make shit tough when they don't like you, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think a lot of guys too, that's how they'll end up being like, okay, these are like the top 5 objection handles.
Yeah.
These are
it's all techniques.
They're like it's some weird secret thing that you're like unlocking all these different doors in order to get to the end result.
You lose that authenticity though when you do that.
Boom.
That's
exactly.
the main thing.
Yeah.
So you said something, I'm curious if you believe this in general, that in your example with the real estate, with the agent versus going to the entire condo, and you can go from here to here very quickly. Do you believe in general that it's better to almost jump into that deep end and take on bigger shit, even if you don't maybe quite know how?
I would say so.
Yeah.
I think so because like you're either going to have the learning curve down here, which is what I did.
Yep.
You know, you're either going to have the learning curve down here selling Instagram followers to, you know, people that are artists and whatever,
Yep.
doing random stuff, making no money because your services cost $500, $1,000.
Yeah.
They're going to be you're going to have equally as many pissed off customers. You're going to have equally as many happy customers, and you're going to have equally as many in the middle customers.
Right.
You know, and if your fulfillment is good on both, then you're going to have the same number of happy customers.
Yeah.
You know, so like the reality is, whatever you were going to learn down here was going to be still new challenges, still uncharted territory, still discussions with people that you haven't talked to before or understand the landscape of their business. So
Yep.
you might as well do it at the top.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So I wanted to pivot a little bit to some more personal stuff. I know you've talked about in videos you've made that you're big on structure, you're big on discipline, and especially when you came out of school, right? You're going from sort of part-time student, part-time business owner to now you're fully in entrepreneurship. So for you, and the reason I'm curious to know kind of what that structure and discipline actually looked like for you on a day-to-day as you started building. And I ask that because there's this big culture of like grind. And if you're not putting in, 20-hour days, like you're a fucking bitch and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, do you feel that that's true? Like, what's kind of your take?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's true for me personally, like that. But I think the difference is that, I would describe what I have as like, I have really good work ethic, but I am not structured. Like I'm really,
You're about the volume.
Yeah. Like I'm all over the
And
place.
the speed.
Yeah,
And the speed.
And the speed kills.
But I'm all over the place. So like for me to get a good amount of work done, I got to be sat in front of a computer for 12, 14 hours a day because I'm going to be doing random
You're
shit.
kind of bouncing around.
Yeah. So like, I do know guys that manage to make 8 hours a day work, and I'll even see them and be like, wow, this guy is lapping me a little. And it just comes down to different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
For me, being in front of a computer all day long is what it takes in order to get the job done, and going downstairs for an hour at the end of the day to go to the gym, and then coming back upstairs and going to bed by 8:30 and waking up at 5 and do it all over again. That's what it takes for me to get it done. And then that turns into like an anxiety thing too. Cause then like whenever I'm doing other shit, I'm like, oh man, I should really be working.
I'm falling behind a little bit. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a perpetual loop. But like I said, I it's different strokes for different folks. And I have seen people that are very disciplined, very structured in the way that they approach things, manage to work less hours. And I don't know how that looks on a long enough time frame, to be fair. Like I haven't had the exposure to what that looks like over 10, 20 years.
But while you have the youth, I mean, why not put it into work?
Why not
right?
put it into work? And, there are times where it's like, I've missed out on this, that, or the third for sure. But I would say like, I don't regret it. I'm pretty happy with where I am at in life. And I think that more importantly, in 5 years, in 10 years, the compound effect of that is going to be like, holy shit, I'm glad I didn't do this, that, and the third.
100%. Well, I mean, it kind of goes back to that thing of like, you're going to pay a price at some point. When are you going to pay it?
Yeah. It's like, you can choose the hard things or the easy things.
Yeah. Hard now means easy later. Easy now means hard later.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious about one other thing when it comes to this, the talk of being able to put these long days in. We live in such a time of like, there's just distractions everywhere. Like we talked about, there's TikTok and YouTube, and YouTube's a killer for me. Like it's interesting you say I don't even go on YouTube. I've actually kind of had to go there now as well because it's just there's so much.
The algorithm's so insane.
Yeah, like every video, I'm like, holy shit, I want to watch all of these, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you ever have a problem with that at all? And if you did, like, how'd you just block all the noise out?
That's a good one.
That's a good question. Yeah. The reason I don't have a problem with YouTube is because I have no attention span. So I just physically can't watch a 8-minute video.
Right.
The killer for me is like TikTok and Instagram
like
Reels.
the short form.
Oh yeah. That'll get me every time. but I'm kind of smart about it, you know, like I have 2 phones. The one phone has nothing on it. No, the closest thing that I could find myself doom scrolling is LinkedIn
Right.
on that phone,
Yeah.
you know? And so
That gets boring fast.
oh, it gets boring super fast.
It's just people like it's an ego competition pretty much. Then
Yeah. And then there's like, I have Facebook on that phone to check ads, and
That's all the parents on there posting.
Yeah. So that gets boring in about 3 minutes as well.
the parent.
Yeah.
Always all the parents.
I think at this point, like
Happy birthday.
Soon they'll get to Instagram. They're not there yet.
no.
Yeah.
Bless them though. But yeah, like the closest I'll get to being super distracted is like sitting on Facebook Marketplace and like looking at random stuff,
Looking at cars
like
you
that,
might buy.
or watches.
Yeah.
Like that'll get me. But and so I've had to just put structure in place for myself to not get distracted. I take the other phone, I put it in the other room. If I find myself on it, I'll straight up chuck it across the room.
Yeah.
And just get this the fuck away from me.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm like on Instagram for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then even that phone has like, I can only be on Instagram for 30 minutes.
You're like the time limit.
All
things
time limits on all of it.
Yeah.
Because I do
those work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll push past it occasionally, for sure. But like for me, it's just, you know, I would get distracted otherwise.
Yeah.
So I got to put things in place to not.
I'll give actually like an ultimate hack on the time limit thing, because I use that as well. But I had the same problem when if I knew if I could just ignore the limit, you know how that prompt comes up, I would blow past it also. So I ended up giving the password to somebody else so I didn't know what it was. So it became an actual hard limit.
That's pretty good.
So if anybody's out there who's struggling, I set these limits, but I just click ignore.
Yeah.
Do that. You know, accountability, give the password to somebody else, and that's going to be pretty hard to bypass.
I would agree. I think the other thing that
making
works,
it harder to do.
making
That's
it
the
really
lesson.
hard to do. Yeah. Cause then you got to go ask them.
100%.
With
and
your
they're
tail
gonna be like,
between your legs.
Yeah, exactly. Come on,
yeah.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that definitely works. I also shorten mine to like as short as possible, like it's like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you'll click through it like 1 or 2 times, but you get to like the 3rd time and you're like, what the hell am I doing? You know? Yeah.
I'm addicted.
Yeah, exactly. Get this away from me.
They
Throw
got
it across the room.
They got me. Yeah. No. Yeah, that's interesting because there's actually a company. It's called Brick, where
Oh, yeah.
I've seen that. You
place
stick it on the fridge.
Yeah, and you do it. But I think your way is better because it almost, you know, it almost makes you have to, like Alex said, put your tail in between your legs,
100%.
and have that conversation. But yeah, like you know, I do want to ask you more about like the importance of rolling up your sleeves and like time to get to work. You know, you said you created 5 or 6 businesses. You're kind of a serial entrepreneur, and you're somebody who definitely wants to do a lot in this world. And you mentioned, you know, the compound effect and all these different things about, you know, if you put in the work now, it's gonna like, you know, choose your, you're putting in the work now. Why did you, because a lot of people, the counter argument to that is you're supposed to have all your fun in the 20s. You're supposed to, you know, live at large then, and then, you know, put in the work later. But, you know, when I think of Alex Zastre, you're definitely someone that's had a lot of fun too. So I guess where do you find that balance? And, you know, what's the goal for you? Are you going to keep it living fast for the rest of your life? Or do you think you'll get to the point where you want to live slow?
Yeah, I think it's finding like a good mix between the two. Like right now I'm sober. I've been sober for like 2 months completely, no liquor, no nothing. And then there's times where, you know, I'll drink for like a month, not for a month straight, obviously, but like you know, I'll have, you know, I'll
fun.
recreationally drink or whatever. Yeah. And so I think it is like finding a balance, but finding like a sensible balance, you know, like I think being so restrictive that you're never going to have a good time ever is probably no way to live. But I think also being able to say no to people, hey man, going out, it's my buddy's birthday. Like that's what I really notice with people that have like the other end of the spectrum, you know, is like somebody you'll call and they're like, oh, I've got a buddy's birthday tonight. Like I got one guy, I swear to God, this guy goes to a birthday like every week, 52 weeks out of the year, he's at a birthday. You know,
a lot of friends.
I've had friends like that who always had family dinners and stuff too.
They've always got something.
Oh yeah,
you know. So
this
like
weekend.
the good old family
learning to
dinner.
say no. Like, you know, I'm a big family man. I'm a big religious man, and like I'll I'll have to say no to my family, not because I want to, but because I didn't get all my work done that I needed to get done. I say no to people being like, hey, let's go do XYZ in the third all the time. All the time I'll say like, no, dude, like I can't. I got to work. I can't.
Yeah.
Where does that itch come from? You mentioned like how, you almost feel bad when you're not working all the time. Like why do you have that itch? Like what's the purpose? Like what's driving you?
Oh, man, just getting as far as I possibly can in this like fleshy shell that I'm walking around in. You know what I mean? Like being able to look back at the end and be like, okay, I kind of did it. I've got a good number of houses. My family is looked after. I can pass down stuff to my family for a long period of time. I've made a difference in my community, and being able to like leave some sort of mark. No matter how big or small. But I think what scares me more than anything is reaching that point in life where you die and you got nothing to show for what your time on earth. You didn't create anything of value for anybody. You didn't change anything. The world was the same when you started on it as when you left it. And so I don't know exactly what that looks like. Like I've made businesses that are good. I don't think I've made a business yet, and I think it will come, that is like life altering for a large number of people. And I think that will be like when I can reach that point, then I'll be really, really pleased with myself. And I mean, I probably wouldn't retire. That'd be impossible. But like, that's what kind of drives it, is like,
you feel like you haven't reached that point yet. So when you're doing other things, you're like, I got to get back on the saddle until I find it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, I don't know if even when I do that, I don't think that even when I do that thing, I will feel like I will have accomplished it. I think that, unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurs are plagued with this. I don't want to call it insecurity, but just like this feeling that no matter what you do, it's never enough. And so I think a lot of people feel that. And
it's like bros in the gym, except the business version.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Like there's never a day you want to stop getting bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Locked In Performance got you covered.
Yeah,
for that. Yeah.
Maybe you will get too big.
Yeah. Locked In Power,
Ronnie
Locked
Coleman.
In Power and Performance. You're freaking looking like Ronnie Coleman.
Ronnie.
I picked the upper echelon.
Good man.
I don't know about that squat weight though. I think that's his. I think that's only him.
Yeah.
That's too funny. So a slightly personal one for you, because you mentioned it just now. Is faith a big part of your operating system, your journey?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it kind of guides. I think more so than anything, it guides the way that I operate in business and stuff. And like I'll have I've had a lot of situations in business, especially more recently, like over the last kind of 2 years, where I've started to see more success, and then you get people that hate on you or dislike it or try and cut you down. And I think it gives you a good framework to like deal with that, which is basically turn the other cheek and keep rolling. Like fuck them, keep moving, and let it roll off of you. And then I think that there's other things in life where like had something bigger than me not existed, I don't know how I would have pushed through it. Which I think is like a lot of people say like it's really easy to be religious when times are good, but it's really difficult when times are bad. And I've actually found it to be the opposite. I found it really easy to be like, look, man, I really need help right now, versus like, thank you so much for blessing me with all of this shit that I have in life.
It's almost you going in that place made you realize the importance of it.
Yeah, because you got nothing else. It's just you and the big guy. So yeah, I think it's important. I've found it really important personally. But yeah,
have you found it challenging? Because I feel like we live in a time now, and especially I won't say who, but there's lots of groups who would probably hate on that a little bit, right? And I find especially just in this modern era, and it's a very strange thing, but there's a lot of people who, if you said that to them, they would almost scoff at it. Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure you've come across that. Have you found that that's been tough at all, or is it more like when your faith is at a certain place, it's a little bit unshakable?
Yeah, I'm not really too worried about it a lot of the times. I mean, and like just historically, like Jesus was a real dude. It's like pretty provable.
Yep.
I don't know, and all signs kind of point to the fact that religion is to some extent true. So I don't know. I think so be it. And I think we're witnessing like a serious degradation in our entire society the further that people move away from religion. Like it's actually insane. The less that people have something to be like, hey, these are kind of the confines of how you should be living, of morality, like the
the debauchery goes crazy.
And debauchery is going crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, yeah, I think more people now than ever are like not than ever, but like in the last 20 years, I think we're seeing like probably the biggest push towards religion and conservatism in general, I think.
Yeah.
Currently.
Yeah.
You know, it's cool to be conservative again. Kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, UBCO would say otherwise.
Oh yeah.
Little shout out. But I was gonna say, you know, it's interesting you say that, because one thing that I've always fell back on religion myself is almost you believing in it. Like you believing it makes it real regardless or not. You believing in something, that goes back to, you know, Jake and I, when we were talking about manifestation and energies and stuff like that. Like when you believe in something, like you mentioned values, you mentioned, you know, the fact that base morality, like, you know, you're not going to go in the store and steal something because you know that God's seeing you, and it almost forces you to be a better person. And that's where I fall under. It's like, if that's something, as long as those values are good, like don't steal. You ask 1,000 people, and listen, 998 of them are going to say that's bad. It's probably not good. I'm not saying in all cases, but in a lot of cases, if you can get that base set of morality, and that's good, like not steal from the store because you believe in the man upstairs, I think more people should get behind that. So I think that's interesting. But yeah,
I'd agree. I think gives you a good base framework to work from, for sure.
So something I've been curious to ask you this whole time is, you've obviously achieved a lot, very successful, but you're very young still. You're mid-20s.
Yeah.
Have you had times, especially as you were coming up, where that was something you had to almost overcome, that insecurity of like, yeah, I'm a young guy in a game that, you know, especially in finance, investment banking, all these different things, probably is dominated by older guys, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I see that even now, but I think like I'm kind of reaching the point where it's no longer becoming relevant. Like I would say, I think, you know, getting into my latter half of my 20s here, it's becoming less relevant that I'm young, because I'm not really that young anymore.
Right.
But yeah, definitely. Like when I was 21, 22, 23, 24, I think that definitely played a role. I think there's a lot of things you can do to counteract that. I see a lot of guys that get on calls. They look like shit. They're wearing a t-shirt. Their hair's not done properly. They aren't shaved. I'm not shaved right now, but they're not shaved. You know, like
neither are we, so we can make
fucking right. But like, there's things you can do to make yourself like not appear like an idiot.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
like if you just do those things, then people will take you more seriously. Make your background look nice, like little things, you know. And I see that a lot with guys that I work with, that I like consult with or help, is like, you know, okay, your camera's pointed at your view out of your apartment, but like there's a deck chair behind you on the balcony. Like you're wearing a t-shirt. You've got you look young as fuck because your hair's not done. Like whatever, you know, like these little things, kind of compound into creating the holistic understanding of like, okay, who am I on the phone with? Who am I dealing with? Who am I doing business with? And so it is very possible for you to counteract that.
It almost forces you to like level up because you're dealing with older people, because you have to, you know, put in those extra effort, like you said, move the lawn chair, throw it off the balcony.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Whatever. Yeah. And I think it, I think it's interesting. And I also think that, when it comes down to investment banking, like one thing that I've noticed, like that I know you personally, is we definitely have a little bit of a entrepreneur group here in Vancouver. And like, I know you mentioned, you know, being, all these businesses you ran, how important, I know you've throughout that journey have been, you know, around a lot of very successful entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, like Jake mentioned. And I guess like one thing that I'll say is it definitely helps with my confidence a lot being around people like that. And I just want to know the impacts it had on you and how important has that been in your life being around those type of people.
Can I throw one thing as a follow up to what
Yeah,
Alex
go
was
for
just
it.
saying first?
Yeah, 100%.
And then we'll get to that.
Yeah, go for it.
So just because it's so relevant to what you just said. So, you know, when you're talking about this idea that to an extent you do have to present some kind of an image, right? Because that's important, right? The way that people see you. But I've also heard you talk about that you kind of walk through this life with a bit of an attitude of there's not necessarily a lot of people that I look at and I'm in admiration, I'm blown away by them. And that also your attention is something that should be earned. And those two things, like I'm just thinking about in my mind, can sometimes appear like they're counter to each other. Do you know what I mean? So like, how do you balance that? Because especially as a younger person trying to do stuff, anybody out there are people you have to impress. But if you get too much down that rabbit hole and you're such a pleaser and do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's also not what you want to give off.
I think you need to put yourself in a position to be at a baseline with them.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of come with that frame, you know? But I think it's just difficult to take somebody seriously if they don't have like that first impression. Like first impressions matter.
Yeah.
People do judge each other off of the cover of the book.
Yeah.
You know?
Regardless if they tell you or not.
Yeah, regardless of if they tell you they're not. It's human nature for you to judge somebody based on how they look.
Right.
So if you can present, you know, some degree of I don't know, like looking
Professionalism, yeah.
Then it makes it a lot easier for you to have that kind of attitude.
Yep.
And feel that kind of way about yourself as well. Like, you know, that admiration thing is a great point. Like I hate going to like concerts because I hate looking up at a dude and being like, oh wow, you know, like just kind of pisses me off. And so it's the same thing. Like that admiration, I think I'm pretty cool, you know, like I'm not the kind of guy to be super egotistical and like, oh yeah, I'm the shit. But like, you know, I know my worth, I suppose is the way I would put it. And so I think that you should portray that and you should feel good about yourself and portray that to the world. And you should hold yourself with a little bit of professionalism so that people take you seriously. Yeah. So I think it's two-parted like that.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the concert thing. I've always had that thought even as well about like, and this is going to sound like a weird one, but like wearing sports jerseys.
Oh
you're literally rocking another dude's name on your back.
Yeah.
And you're walking with your wife or your girl. And it's just, I don't know. And it, like I've said that to people before and they're like, yeah, that's kind of a weird pride thing. But I'm like, no, that's not what it is.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Because if you have your shit going on, like you think you'd want to wear your jersey.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And it's just people seeing celebrities and like going crazy. And, oh my God, can you sign this? And I see that and I'm like,
Yeah, like he's just a dude.
Yeah, he's just a human being.
He's just a dude really good at what he's doing.
Yep.
You know, so like have that admiration of like good work. This is crazy that you've been able to do what you've done.
Like show respect.
Show respect. Yeah. Like show respect to people that are further ahead of you, but like, don't suck them off, you know, like, come on, like don't be weird about it, you know? And so people kind of lose sight of that. And I think that's also because I think it comes down to like maybe people don't feel that they're anywhere near that.
Yep.
You know?
For sure.
Whereas like for me, it's like, oh, you're really good in your lane. And I'd like to think that I'm equally good in my lane.
Yeah.
Or that I'm working my way to be equally as good in my lane, even if I'm not at that level yet.
Yeah. I have a path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of changing the question that I asked before because I wanted
to answer that one.
You can
similar.
It's similar. Right. So like, you know, the Friends and you see all this, like, you know, everyone's kind of entrepreneurial, everyone's kind of young, you know, everyone's in their lane, like you just said. You know, I think as someone in, you know, our generation in particular is that shiny object syndrome is a real thing. Like, you know, seeing someone else's, you know, this is my close buddy, he's doing X, Y, and Z. He's making more. Like you mentioned, there's guys that sit in, you know, are very structured and, you know, figure out how to make a lot of money by being very structured. And then, you know, do you ever get like maybe I should be structured. And if you do get that way, how do you just be like, no, you know what? I'm going to stay my path. And then, to tie it all in, it's like, what impact has those people had in good and bad?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think number one, like seeing other people and what they're doing, you should definitely use it as motivation, which is what I do. I'll never wish poorly upon somebody, and I would definitely never look at another dude and see how well he's like. Obviously, you'll get some degree of like, just internal, like maybe you feel jealous
better
for like a second.
Yeah.
Some envy or
but then the mind frame needs to be like, okay, like this guy isn't special. You can do this too. What is he doing that you can learn from? And so I'd say that being around a lot of guys that are doing well teaches you that. It teaches you like not to have that envy, not to have that jealousy, just to be humble and learn from how somebody else has achieved more success. They have the same access to information that you have. They have the same everything. You're
almost changing the frame of mind.
Totally. And you need to do that. It's just like throwing your phone out of the room, like you need to physically make it difficult for you to feel that kind of emotion by overcoming it with your mind.
Yep.
And then the second thing I'll say to that as well, that makes it easier to do that, is that when I first started and other guys started having a lot of success, I would look at it and it would really get me down because I'd be like, oh shit, like this guy's smoking me. But what you realize after you're in the game for like, 4 years, 5 years, is like somebody was way ahead and then you did one thing that got you even further than they were or are currently. And so you realize that this whole thing is a marathon, not a sprint. Even though it is about speed all the time, for sure. But it's about speed with purpose and that end goal in sight, so that you're running towards something.
You need to be running towards the right thing, and then you act with speed.
Totally, exactly.
And do you think that gives them the most success when you're, you mentioned, going back to what you said earlier about the authenticity thing, like you're someone who's not structured, just leaning into that. Do you think that's have you set that's the hack for you to win the marathon?
I think so to a certain extent, because I always do a bunch of different shit, and so I'll learn a lot. But I also think it's a bit of a downfall. I'm in the middle right now of cutting off a bunch of businesses that I was doing, profitable businesses, and just saying like, I got to leave this.
Yeah,
I've got to just cut ties with this business. I've got too much on my plate.
It's a good problem to have.
It is, yeah. It's a good problem to have, but it's difficult, to cut things and realize like, okay, my attention is too thin, too thinly spread. And you learn that by seeing other dudes that are doing one or two things rather than 6 or 7 and doing really well.
Focus.
Yeah. So I would say yes, to some degree, doing a whole bunch of shit all at once is like a superpower to some extent. But at the same time, you got to lock in.
Yeah.
You got to lock in, and you got to force yourself to narrow down. You got to do the throwing the phone across the room in that aspect of your life too.
Can't scroll 30 reels. You just got to focus on watching that one video.
Yeah, exactly, and learning from it in depth.
It's very interesting. You mentioned, you got to lock in. You got to hunker down. You got to get it done. And I think a lot of people out there have that problem of, they have friends who are doing maybe in their mind better than them, but they may not actually. And, I think almost just focusing on who you are is more freeing. So, to wrap us all up, I know you are very familiar with how we do it at Living Fast, but I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball for this one. So, I often say for the last question of this podcast is always, how do you live fast? But we've already got that answer, and it's speed kills. So I gave it a little bit more thought and wanted to ask, why do you live fast, Alex Zastre?
It's a good question. I live fast so I can get as much done as quickly as humanly possible, fail quickly, and keep rolling so that, I can maximize the time that we have here on Earth. That's why I do it.
Incredible.
Epic. Love that.
Yeah, epic. Well, yeah, thank you guys for the episode.
Thanks for coming on, brother. That was awesome.
Thank you,
Thanks, Weston,
Alex,
for having me.
Live fast.
Live fast, baby.